With your role at Covenant Eyes, and I know writing a book, there's obviously research involved, but the research you've done, the studies you've done on church and church culture, and even interviewing the many leaders that you did for this, did anything surprise you or really stand out in your findings?
In 16 years of doing this, it's hard to become a little bit surprised by what we
Sure.
what we see, right?
Sure.
However, um, I guess two things stood out for me. One is there's some churches out there again that are doing some amazing work. And what I did with the book was create a primer so that other ministry leaders could not only follow what other churches were doing well, but also learn and discover about programs like Pure Desire and Samson Society and other programs and organizations that are ready to help now. And surprisingly, when I talk to many pastors and leaders at the local level, they often don't know, even some don't even know about Covenant Eyes. And we've been doing this for 23 years now, creating software and content to help people stop using pornography for good or never start, and partnering with churches on a large scale. And I was just at our conference not too long ago and said, "Have you heard of Covenant Eyes?" And like, never heard of it. It's like, and this has been he was a long time pastor, had been pastoring for probably 4 years. You know? And so that really cemented for me that the need for a primer for pastors and ministry leaders to really understand the basics, but then also discover and learn about all the resources that are available for the local church now. That's a main purpose of the book too. The other part that did give me a little pause is the things that we know to be true that were cemented in scientific research and study. So when we consider that when sin creates suffering and it creates distance, we pull away from God because of our sin. Often that happens. Sometimes we want to be repentant, and especially when it comes to pornography, we end up in this cycle. But what scientific studies were showing was indeed there was a direct correlation between pornography use and church attendance, volunteerism, prayer life, Bible reading. Do I feel close to God? All of those scientifically from the University of Oklahoma and other scientific studies were showing that indeed pornography is hurting your church. Every church in America is being impacted by pornography and on multiple levels. And so we often look at the church and go, well, why are numbers shrinking? And why aren't people volunteering? And why aren't they active in this? And there is a correlation to how pornography is impacting the church.
Yeah, I remember as I was getting into my own story and, unlike many people, was also a pastor at the time. And so got to, as I was processing my story and had begun to be public with it, it was preaching. And as part of the preaching and interacting with people around my story and what was happening in our church, it just really began to hit home for me that for most people, and I would say that pretty significantly, for most people in the church, the deepest pain that they've encountered in their life is sexual in nature. Whether it's abuse that happened to them as a child, something that happened in their parents' marriage, something that happened in their marriage, their addiction to pornography. And then you look around at the world and you're like, man, it is everywhere. It is ubiquitous. It's like, as we heard someone say, it is harder now to avoid pornography than it is to find it. And I can't think of any other topic that is both personally impacting people in the church and is so prevalent all over outside the church. And yet for many in the church, back to your first point, they're still largely unaware of what even exists out there to help people. And I think we feel that here at Pure Desire too, that disconnect, like, oh, we want every church to do something and know something. And whether it's Pure Desire or Be Broken or Samson Society or, all the number of groups that are doing good work in this area, it's like, do something. And yet many are still going, oh, well, we don't really know, or we didn't have a plan. And so we hope people might, go to a counselor if they need that. And it just, I don't know, in some ways it's heartbreaking because it's like once you get into this, you realize these realities. But if you haven't really taken some of those steps, I think as a pastor or leader, and I don't fault them because, when I was in my own struggle, I was pretty blind to it because I didn't want to address it. So I know there's a lot of reasons we don't address it, but when we're in that place, there's just this disconnect. And I really hope we're all working towards solving that so that people know there's good resources out there.
Yep.